session and the April 16th, 2021 meeting.
Yes, both.
Can we have discussion on that? I have a couple of points on the minutes for the February 18th. On the second page, second bullet point from the top, language under section 1810-40 should read 1810-30.
Thank you.
Under the master plan, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth bullet point down should be quirkiness instead of quirkiness.
Yes, those corrections were made.
And I believe there was also discussion of including something about Tree City in the
Okay.
master plan as well.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Lucy.
And I have no comments on the other one.
Okay. Oh, thank goodness. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Guess what? We're going to appoint a new chair today. Yay! Because I am not able to run a meeting anymore. So are there any volunteers?
I have a question.
Okay.
Is it the case that members that are serving both on the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission can't share the Planning Commission?
No, that's not stipulated anywhere in the code.
Okay.
It's just not, it just had, as far as my knowledge, it hasn't ever been done that the person on the board was also the chair of the committee, but with that being said, I don't think that that is, it's not necessarily forbidden.
I will also bring one thing up just as a point of discussion. Not acting on this anytime really soon, but I am considering stepping down from the Planning Commission just because I have to recuse myself so often for having conflicts. I'm not running out the door, but I'm bringing that up because we are talking about appointing a chair.
So I have a question too. So, if a person needs to recuse themselves from the discussion, can they still be the chairperson and run the meeting even though they do not take part in the discussion?
I'd want to confirm with Bo. I think you'd have to modify the way that well, if they're recusing themselves, they wouldn't be voting anyway. Because with the Planning Commission, the chair is a voting member. But if you're recusing yourself from the conversation, it may be possible that you would still be able to run the meeting and just not participate. But I would want to confirm that with our town attorney before I stated for sure, which I can go and try to confirm that with him if you'd like while you continue discussion. It's up to you.
Lucy?
That to me is a sticky situation. You know, trying to, if I feel I need to recuse myself from something because I'm too involved, then that questions my ability to be impartial. So if I'm not impartial enough to vote, why would I be impartial enough to run the meeting?
And that is a fair argument. There's been conversation before about when someone recuses themselves, they should actually leave the table. Some places recommend that you even leave the room so that there's no ability for someone to say that you influenced by your presence in a discussion. So that is also a valid point.
Monica. You knew I was looking at you.
I'm going to step out just for a moment and go get some clarification on board member representatives acting as chair on Planning Commission while you guys continue your conversation.
I don't know. I will think about it. I don't feel like I'm as knowledgeable as you are, Lucy. So even if you had to recuse yourself, I think you'd be a great chair. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. Is anybody else interested in being the chair? I see your look. Yeah. My term is almost up, I think. I think my term is up soon.
Never. Never.
Nobody told you it was an endless commitment?
Well, can we put this on hold for a week and,
Well, actually, you know, as soon as Corinne gets off the phone with Bo,
okay,
if she can get a hold of him, then we will have a opinion as to, you know, the two questions up before us.
okay. So we'll just sit back and twiddle our thumbs for a minute. It won't take long if she gets a hold of Bo right away.
Right, right. And who knows, maybe she's got a hotline number that none of the rest of us have.
Do they post these meetings on the website now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why you have to do your thing, because in the YouTube videos, if your microphone is not on, it does not pick you up at all. And so having dead space in a meeting is kind of aggravating when you're trying to know what's going on. Well, and then the other sticking point is we can only have so many mics on at a time, so you kind of have to make sure you turn it on and turn it off so that other people get recorded. Yep.
What is the limit? I know there's more of you.
It used to be 2, and then it went up to 3. And I don't know, did you notice, Karen, at the last meeting how many mics we had on at a time?
I don't know, because I think people are used to turning them off now.
Okay. There is no hiding.
Okay, so for a member that recuses himself, it's not prohibited, but it's not recommended for the reasons that were discussed. And as long as our municipal code does not prohibit it, there is no reason that a board member could not act as the chair for the Planning Commission.
Yes.
Sorry. Would you temporarily think about being chair and we continue to search?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I can turn the meeting over to Lucy now.
Do we want to have do we need to have a vote?
Oh, yeah, sorry, we need to vote.
So we need it, okay. So I move that Lucy Hunter be the new commission chair.
All those in, or any discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous decision. Yeah, give her the,
I asked Barb that you continue to chair this meeting because I will be recusing myself.
oh, right, gotcha. No worries, I like the gavel
Thank you.
anyways.
I was having heart palpitations.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. No, this is fine. Some days I have good days and some days I don't. So let's move on then to Clark's N variance. Lynn?
And excuse me, Madam Chair, if I may, I'll be recusing myself from this discussion. If it's all right with everybody, I'll just stay put.
Sure.
Is that on?
Yes,
If it's red.
you can pull it down closer to you.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, I believe all of you guys have read the letter from Odyssey. And basically, this is, the subdivision has been approved. It's been through process twice and did get approved with a reduced density. And Then when we're doing the engineering work on it, to place the cul-de-sac, the cul-de-sac is placed right over where the town water and sewer has gone through. I think that's about 3 or 4 years ago. Travis would know. For the correct overburden to be in place after we do the cul-de-sac, it requires a variance of 0.5% of slope. So the maximum slope allowed is 7%, and this would end up being 7.5% on the slope of the cul-de-sac in place. So that is just the variance today is all that's being considered. And that's so that protects the town water and sewer lines that exist. So, any questions?
Anybody with any questions, comments?
I think it's a pretty no-brainer, at least from my point of view. It's like we want to protect our infrastructure, and if adding 0.5% to the grade protects our infrastructure, seems like it makes sense to me. You're not really making any dramatic changes at all
No change.
in all of this,
Yeah.
so.
Well, does someone want to go ahead and make it? Oh, we have a comment back there.
I just had a question. Why,
In your mask, please, Tom.
my name is Tom Gifford. My daughters own the lot at 110, which abuts the property. I was unable to attend some of the previous, what's the word I'm looking for? Online, you know, when you not in person. At any rate, I don't have a clue how to do that. I was curious to know why the town isn't involved in this. Why don't they, if they don't want their water line exposed, why don't they just say, we don't want it to do it this way? Do you understand my question?
Not really.
Okay, if it's down 7 feet, why is it this lady's responsibility to come before the town and request that she doesn't have to go down? Why doesn't the town just say, forget it, don't do it?
So I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you,
I-
Fern.
I don't disagree with you. Actually, I've stated to, also to the applicant directly that in this situation, I would have loved to have been able to just say, yes, I want to grant this, but because our municipal code has steps that you're required to follow if you're outside of what the code allows, I don't have the authority to go outside of that. So our code says you cannot have a grade that's higher than 7%. Even though we want, our opinion and our recommendation to planning and to the board is to approve the variance, because we don't want the applicant and their engineer and their construction crews trying to do anything requiring us to lower our lines, because that's ultimately what would happen. So administratively, we don't have the authority to approve it. So that's why it has to go through this process.
Okay, my last question. How long has this 7% grade been in existence?
As far as I'm aware, that's been in the code since the land use regulations and code was drafted, which was in the mid-'80s. So it is something that may be open for revision when the board reviews the municipal code and does a codification update.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments, questions? Would someone like to make a motion to go ahead and accept this variance?
That we approve the variance.
A second?
Okay, any more discussion? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Yes, here.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passed. I am so sorry. I turn it off to be a good person, then I forget to turn it on. So the motion passes, and Lynn, you have your variance, so. What? Oh, it's got to go in front of the board.
Yeah.
And then we go from there. But I don't think there's going to be a problem, but thank you for your patience, Lynn. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Now we're going to move the gavel. Oh, I thought she was only going to finish out that agenda item.
I can finish off this
Okay.
meeting. There's only one more thing.
Okay.
Accessory dwelling units, the ordinance on that. Can we have some discussion on that? Comments?
So I'll just give an overview of what's included in the packet. You have so what the Governmental Affairs Committee for the Board of Trustees was tasked with was looking at some ideas and what it would take to do some regulation to allow accessory dwelling units within the R1 low-density residential. Currently, low-density residential R1 does not allow any accessory dwellings on the lot. And there's been a lot of conversation and requests about potentially regulating and allowing accessory dwelling units with specific limitations within the R1 for both private use mother-in-law suites and also as potential rentals for long-term rentals, which is something that's definitely lacking in the town of Paonia. So what you have in front of you is a ADU summary dated December 2020. These are the talking points and recommendations that came out of the Governmental Affairs and Public Safety Committee, as well as the preliminary draft ordinance 2021 to be determined.
Okay, any comments, questions?
I have a question.
Thank you, Lucy.
So is the intention here as far as short-term rentals to keep those in R2 and different zoning areas?
I can't recall in our short-term rental information what the zoning restrictions were, but I do know when it comes to accessory dwelling units that the intent was that they not be used for short-term rental.
But again, that's limited to the R1. I mean, we're not looking at abolishing short-term rentals within the town, or are we?
The short-term rental is a separate topic, and they're looking at regulating short-term rentals and establishing regulations, because right now, we don't address it in that fashion. Our code addresses short-term renting of rooms, but again, a code written in the 80s, short-term rentals weren't a thing, that didn't exist, so.
It's just, sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine, go ahead.
I see that Section 3A, Part F, a minimum of 90-day rental period should be required with a written lease for this draft ordinance. And I would just like to know that there's the ability to provide some form of short-term rental under a different framework elsewhere.
So right now, technically, short-term rentals are prohibited. We know that they exist, and they are looking at regulating them, but they would be regulated under a different ordinance.
Okay.
Right now, short-term rentals as a secondary home in R1 shouldn't exist anyway, because you're only allowed to have one residence. And so this would allow for those secondary units, but they would not be eligible for short-term rentals. R2 is not included because R2 already allows for multiple homes on a single lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne. Monica?
So I was looking at the proposed ordinance, and I had a couple questions, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about these two things, so I don't know that I have an agenda to promote, but, so it said that they thought that one parking space should be required with the ADU, and I'm as somebody who owns my own property here, and if I ever wanted to do an ADU, providing a parking space would be something that might be difficult for me. And I know that we're in a housing crisis, and so I'm wondering if maybe we should think about making that, an optional thing, or they have, alternative parking, like bike parking or something else. I'm not entirely sure that a parking space, and I know we're a car culture, but anyway, so that's just something to think about. And then also it says that the ADU is owned by the primary house at the same time. And I was just questioning why. Like, if maybe there's something we could, or something to think about maybe, is that we might be able to let people sell that, or I don't know what the reasoning behind it has to be owned together. I like to keep homeowners with their options, if that's possible. If they own their own land, that it would be nice if they could do as much as possible with it, provided they're not, hurting anybody around them. So those are just my thoughts on the ADUs. That's all I had.
I'm going to make a comment on that. There are many homes here in town that are on ditch companies. And we have, I'm chair of the Stewart Ditch Sprinkling, and we have one place that there's a real problem with that was in a will, that a second unit was willed to someone else other than the homeowner. And I personally don't think they should be able to sell them because of the water issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to comment as well. It seems to me that you would have to subdivide that property if you're going to actually pass ownership on. And so that would be a whole process in itself of going through, creating a subdivision. To me, if you're starting to sell these accessory dwelling units, it's kind of contravening the intent of the whole rule here, which is that we can have extra places for people to live without chopping up the town more and making it, very high density. And I got a comment from a citizen, and she has concerns about allowing this in R1 at all because, people have lived in R1 in their homes with only their home for so many years, and that we're now expecting them to put up with another home next to theirs. And she would say, let's make it R2 instead of R1. But, and I think it also, to limit it to being less a commercial thing, it's like this came up in a lot of ways because of the mother-in-law house, and I want to have a place for my parent to live. I want to have a place for a relative to live that's on my property. And yeah, it's the whole chopping up issue for me, personally.
Karen, do you have any comments?
Agree that this was the mother-in-law house kind of thing, and it's completely separate from the short-term rental. It should be, probably a lot of these places will never be rented because the mother-in-law will be living there. But if they do choose to rent them, it's a 90-day, it's a real long-term rental. This is not to compete with motels and things like that. That's a short-term rental issue that the committee is also looking at. But that's why it's the 90 days. And if you sold it, you sell the land, you sell the whole piece of property. So that's it.
Okay, Monica?
So I'm fortunate enough to own my own land and my own house on a standard city lot. But there are a lot of people here that, they do jobs around town. They help at the laundromat, or they're your baristas, they're your bartenders. A lot of those people are living in campers on other people's property on mesas. So I just want to remind you guys that there are a lot of working class here, people who just cannot afford a house on a standard city lot. We got very, very, very lucky. We got in by the skin of our teeth. And there are a lot of people who have lived here for a long time who do not understand how hard it is to live here. They just don't get it. It's very difficult. So if there's any way that we can make accessory dwelling units as accessible to the people that work here, I think that's something we really need to think about, because we're about to push the people that work here out. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Monica. Lucy? Oh, I'm sorry, Mary's
And
jumping.
I agree with you completely, Monica, on that regard. This town is in desperate need of some affordable housing for people who are the workers and the people who keep this economy going. And so anything that we can do to make that better. The other thing that was a citizen talked to me about, or at least sent me an email about, was the requesting that requires the owner to purchase a tap for the additional use in a separate living unit, whether under one roof or not. And actually, our code does not require that. All it says it needs to, if you extend a line, you need to meter it and not have another tap put in. And right now, that is not allowed under the water moratorium. But once that water moratorium is lifted, then you could have people extending lines to ADUs. But considering the state of our water, I think this is something we also need to look at closely, because we could have a lot of extra homes with water use that aren't taps and that are still draining our resources. And so, you know, it's a juggling act, in my opinion.
Thanks, Mary. How
Chair.
about you, Lucy?
I just have two questions. I didn't see staff recommendations in the packet, so I would like to know what staff recommendations are. And I would like, I mean, we have a shortage of community members here, but I am curious if there's any further community input that anybody who's received it would like to share.
So two things before I answer that. I didn't want Commissioner Fogus' question about parking to fall off of the radar. And so while it is written in the ordinance that one off-street parking shall be, it is the recommendations from the Governmental Affairs Committee that there not be a requirement that a parking space, but that it would be upon the impetus would be on the person who was getting the permit to be able to show that they would have adequate parking, even if that was within the parking that they already have for the accessory dwelling unit. And as far as staff recommendation, there isn't I don't have a staff recommendation as far as approval or any modifications as is presented. Definitely think it's important but not urgent because of the water tap moratorium. But I definitely think it was something that warranted a conversation and discussion about if we could figure out a way to make it work and extend, how could we do that? But I do think it's a valid concern for individuals who've chosen to purchase a home in the R1 to have an expectation that they purchased a home in R1, which means it's low-density residential, one single-family home. And so I'm not sure how you find the balance for the two yet to date, to be honest.
Karen?
One other thing, in the definition of what is an ADU, it says 800 square feet, and in the notes from the committee, it says 500. So I don't know which is.
So the ordinance is drafted by legal representation, and the GAPS paper are their recommendations. Another alternative that I do believe we discussed early on with GAPS, but we haven't, I don't think it was included in any of this information, which may be another option to look at, is while potentially allowing in R1, subject to the availability of water, should there be a restriction on the lot size? Because anyone familiar with the lots in the town of Paonia knows that there can be an R1 lot that meets the minimum requirement, which is 5,000 square feet, and you might have an R1 lot that's 3 times that size. So is that something that the town might want to look at as far as what the size of a lot is to be eligible for a secondary ADU? That may alleviate some of the current concerns of people who live in the R1 that think it's going to become too dense with a second home on a lot.
Mary?
So maybe the way to address that is by setbacks. And if there are adequate setbacks to put a secondary building on, then that could be incorporated into it. And that would mean that the smaller lots could not have sufficient setbacks, and so you couldn't put an ADU on that.
Lynn?
Um, It sounds like you guys are already balancing the important things. I mean, I'm just one of the only citizens here, but we definitely need more housing. And so if R1 lots are large enough, it sounds like that shouldn't preclude some sort of arrangement, whether it's attached or not attached, or as long as you're following the setbacks, the water restrictions, I mean, I don't know how you guys balance what you balance, but the need is strong for more housing. So.
Thank you, Lynn. I'd like to make a comment on this. I'm guessing I live in an R1, and we got a variance on setback and whatnot when we sold the farm and moved here to town. But what I find on our street are cars that have parked and never moved for months. And we have one place that has 2 rentals. I guess what I'm saying is that we need the ADUs, but there's got to be some very strict guidelines with it, and if someone wants to do a variance, they can always come forward and ask for a variance. Mary?
So I'm going to make a motion here, and that I move that we include in this ordinance that town setbacks be adhered to in the lots when creating these units.
Second.
Okay, Karen seconded, but any more comments on this?
I
Lucy?
have other points of discussion. How does this work? Can I amend the motion, or can I make my own motion?
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to approve the draft, or to recommend approval of the draft ordinance to the Board of Trustees with the following caveats: that setbacks be considered, and that rather than requiring 1 off-street parking space, we change that to adequate parking and leave the burden of showing that on the property owner.
Ooh, that's good, I like that. So do you want to repeat that, and we'll be
So
able to go vote?
I move that we recommend to the board approval of the draft ordinance with additional consideration to setbacks, and on item C, changing 1 off-street parking space to adequate parking shall be provided.
Second.
Monica, second that. Any more discussion?
So I guess what we're doing is amending my motion, because my motion was specifically to the setbacks. It was not to accept the ordinance as is. So, yeah, so okay, well, and I'm fine with the amendment if we go ahead and vote on the amendment, and then, yeah, that's fine, as long as the person who seconded my amendment is fine, or my motion. I think,
All fine?
yeah. Yeah, I think Monica did second.
Monica seconded it.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion?
So we're all in favor of that amendment passing?
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, No one.
And then we go back to the main motion as amended, and we vote on that and discuss that.
Okay, so we go back to Mary's motion, and any discussion on this? No, let's vote on it, right? We have to vote on it again. So all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Okay, thank you all. Whoa, this is awesome. If all the meetings were like this, I'd stay forever, but they're not.
Barb,
Yes.